Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart-to-heart conversations about their day-to-day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. Welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Dr. David Lemmon. He's a naturopathic doctor with a specialty, or we shouldn't say that word, with a focus on cancer, or lots of experience on cancer. And what can I say about you? You also are an alumni of the National College of Natural Medicine in Portland, and your clinic name is Rediscover Health Natural Medicine. So I'm really happy to have you here and to have a discussion on health, on life, on everything, and of course on the cancer treatments that you've come across. So why don't we start? What got you interested, one in that subject, or also in generally in natural health?
For me, it was a really, yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Manoa, as well. Yeah, for me, it was really a gradual, organic process where I was in a totally different field and different major. But then in my early 20s, I discovered naturopathic medicine, that it was this thing, and it just kind of lit up like all of the things that I had discovered that I didn't really know, that I loved, but I was kind of in the beginning years of college and studying on my own. I was just really thriving in the health and wellness classes and the psychology class and the anatomy and physiology class and getting straight A's in all of these classes. But then in the field that I was in, my current major, I was getting all these C's and B's and really struggling with that. And because it was a very subjective kind of art program that I was in. And so I just discovered this magical, holistic medical field of naturopathic medicine that kind of combined all these things that I was interested in and passionate about and thriving in my college courses. And so I set an intention to eventually go back to naturopathic medical school. And so I had 4 children at the time, went
Wow.
back to pre-med for 3 years, and then 5 years in naturopathic school in Portland, Oregon. And then we had our 5th child in the middle of medical school, and then another 6th after graduation. So yeah, having 6 kids and going through medical school with 4 kids and 5 kids is just a wild roller coaster ride and story within
Sure.
itself. So just kind of proved to myself that I can take a beating and and kind of just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and having a good time. And I love to learn, and so that's what kept me going through it all, and that passion and that curiosity just really helps to support through those just crazy times.
Yeah, I think in our class, as naturopaths, we were like, by year 4, there are gray hairs, and not in people who should have them. So there's something very intense about the program, but also about the passion. So, what is it that made you passionate about it?
I don't know. It's just that curiosity, that how does the world work? How does the body work? And then kind of seeing, going to, I mainly went to conventional doctors growing up in the 80s and 90s, and it was just kind of seeing the side effects, seeing the doctor only sees you for 2 or 3 minutes and then gives you a drug, and then there's all this big list of side effects, and then the TV commercials that started going with the pharmaceuticals, and slipping in really fast, fine print. It may cause death and may cause cancer and may cause
Mm,
serious infections and that kind of thing in the TV commercials. And it's fun to make fun of, but it's pretty deadly serious when they're spending
yeah.
billions of dollars marketing these things that are incredibly harmful and not native to the human body. So
Hmm.
so yeah, just kind of seeing the conventional medical world and how it wasn't working in this kind of a broken system, and realizing that that God and nature and the universe have provided us all these wonders of mind body medicine and herbal medicine and nutritional medicine and energy medicine, just so many incredible healing modalities that we're surrounded with if we take the time to educate ourselves about it.
Mm. Yeah, and then I was going to say, I have not, I did actually have cancer, but I treated myself naturally and got through it. But I know when I was researching it, I was, it just seemed like there's nothing to be done. Or you go to Mexico to some clinic, and then, you have, what's his name, that doctor with brain, um, he was working on the glioma cells or whatever, where, he had like 40 cases against him, and yet he had all his patients saying that they've been cured, and they were coming to the court case. And there's so much against natural ways of dealing with this. And so it always sort of struck me that with cancer, with chemotherapy, with all of that, which is, it's quite toxic, right? Like, minimally, we should be able to figure out a way to help the body detox faster, or, so that it clears all of this. I don't know, what's your main approach? And how do you look up, for people who are interested in a second opinion, another way of looking at it? I'm not asking you to prescribe here, just to be clear, but just how do we look at things like that?
Yeah, so I developed the seven pathways of healing program to kind of create this holistic model of looking at the world and seeing through this lens of if you're missing, kind of using that analogy that's often used in life balance wheels of,
Mhm.
the bicycle wheel analogy where all the different spokes, if one of the spokes of your bicycle wheel is missing, that gives you a flat tire, and then it's harder to move forward smoothly on your healing journey. So the emotional pathway, the physical pathway, the energetic pathway, the molecular pathway, genetic pathway, social pathway, spiritual pathway, these seven pathways of healing create this well-rounded, holistic approach. And within that, you can either choose an integrative path where you're adding chemotherapy as one aspect of the molecular pathway, and radiation therapy is one aspect of the energetic pathway,
Mhm.
and surgery is one aspect of the physical pathway. But if you only have those three of that triangle that conventional medicine uses with radiation, chemo, and surgery, if you only have those, then your wheel is a triangle, and you can't roll on a bicycle wheel that has a triangle wheel.
Mhm.
It does not work lower. So that's kind of the metaphor, is that well-rounded. If you're limited to those three of chemotherapy, chemo, and radiation and surgery, then you're kind of stuck in that box and in that system. But if you expand out and add in the other seven pathways of healing and all the other thousands of potential natural remedies that actually have been studied and used, either studied scientifically or used traditionally for hundreds or thousands of years successfully, then you can either use it as a framework to integrate with conventional medicine, or if you are philosophically against that, or if the doctors say there's nothing more we can do for you, or you're not a candidate, or you have, like my younger sister was told, you have 100% chance of death from cancer. And so not even giving that 99%
Wow.
kind of idea was just made me so angry. But so it's a really flexible, adaptable program that you can use for 100% natural healing or integrative healing, and combining it with, because there's so many remedies that have been discovered to actually enhance radiation therapy, to enhance chemotherapy to make them more effective, to
Yeah.
target them to the cancer cells specifically, and also to reduce the side effects of the chemo and radiation as well. So it's an incredible world that we are entering as far as the research and the experience that we have, where these things are kind of known and available by a few rare practitioners out there. And that's why I'm trying to get the word out to help people understand what their options are and what is available and how it can be integrated. And you don't have to lose your hair, and you don't have to be vomiting 24/7 after chemotherapy treatments. And so it's just really powerful and beautiful to be able to either integrate with conventional therapies if that's your choice, or to just create a comprehensive, holistic, natural program that can help with cancer as well. So it's really adaptable and flexible and able to personalize for each person.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the personalized is a huge part of it. Um, that, you know, you have to do something that you're aligned with, and I think the reason most people choose conventional is because that's all they ever get told. That, and the doctors themselves will tell you, oh, the statistics in your case are whatever it is, like in your sister. I mean, I can't believe it, 100% death. I mean, how could a person be so arrogant as to believe that? Like there's no hope for anything that is individual to that person. And it's based on stats that are not necessarily what an individual might do for themselves as they take actual care of themselves and look after themselves and do all the things that are pro-life in the sense of embellishing your own immune system, your body, your health, all of that. So we hear these statistics and you look them up and it's the same, same place, same funding, same everything. And and with the help of the big Google industries and all the tech, you can't find a lot of the other evidence, to show that there really are other things that work. What's
Exactly.
your feeling on that yourself? I mean, you have the experience with helping people.
Yeah, I just love how the prognosis issue is just, it's based on statistics of people who go through the conventional medicine box, right? They're going
Yeah.
through that assembly line cookie cutter approach, and those are the statistics that they have as the people that are going through their medical system. And so of course that is a skewed demographic because they are ignoring all those other healing pathways, and it's that limited box of chemotherapy and radiation and surgery. And so if they say you have a 60% chance of dying or a 20% chance of survival or whatever it is, that if you go outside of that box, and if you decide to do integrative medicine or natural medicine and add in all these other approaches, then those statistics, that prognosis is completely erased. Like it has no bearing on your personal life whatsoever, because statistics are just averages. And so every single person is an individual bump on that curve, and that, so you're basically erasing every individual to create an average or a statistic anyway. And then if you add in the actual procedures that you're adding in with the modalities of healing, then it completely changes those. So you can really, like I like to teach that you can really flip around that. If they say you have a 20% chance of survival, you can completely flip that around to an 80% chance of survival when you add in. You can obviously never make any promises and
Of course.
guarantees about any outcome with cancer, but the probability of a long and healthy life can be completely turned around the more you do to increase your level of health. That it's just common sense.
Mhm. I mean, that's the thing about common sense. That's gone out the window.
Not common enough.
Not common enough, no. But it's nonetheless true, right? It's like, You have a say in how the statistics about you fall, right? That's the truth, if you're watered down to seen through only certain eyes, it'll never change, right? Like, I know that many of my my I have to say my old patients, I have to say they're not old, but in the past, um, they would go to their doctor and say, what they're doing and things that are different and whatever, and there'd be no interest in anything else. It would just be,
Mhm.
did they do the steps that were given, and that's very discouraging, when there isn't that that honesty of sharing, for the benefit of the patient. Because I mean, what else are we doing if it isn't to help? Like what's our profession about,
Yeah.
A good question mark these days anyway.
Yeah, it's challenging to have such a broken system that is geared more towards profits and more towards the health of the giant corporations than in the health of the people that the doctors are supposed to be helping. So it's
Hmm.
definitely a challenging world to live in, to have the right education, to have the right information available, and then have the right
Yeah.
practitioners that are knowledgeable in these things that can actually serve and directly help people.
And I think a lot of people don't realize, we're so used to, we go to our doctor, we tend to, at least in Canada, in Canada, we're very, we follow orders and we're generally seen as, nice people that don't want to, upset anyone, right?
Mm,
And I'm from BC, and here there's a massive exodus of people, of healthcare workers, because and nobody knows why, in the sense it's not discussed because our media is bought.
mm,
So nobody knows what's happening. It feels like there's just no care. We don't have a primary doctor. We Hospitals have to close because they don't have nurses.
mm,
And we're just like, what type of system is this? And you would think that what we went through in the last 4 years, that people would wake up. I think they are starting to go, huh, what is this about, But yeah, there's still a lot of waking up necessary, for people to really come back to understanding that they are in charge of their health. We can have experts and we can have many opinions, many paths, and then it's really up to us to feel into it. But when we're in this system that is profit driven, as you were, mentioning, and it's like cookie cutter methodology, you don't feel like you have any agency. And if you don't follow that, then you're out of the system, and then suddenly you don't even get care, right? So this is kind of what we're experiencing here. And there's so many things like that we need to wake up and question, and not take it for granted that what we hear is the truth. So yeah, anyway.
yeah, there's a lot of information and misinformation battles going back and
Yes.
forth for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So what have you found, and again, I'm getting you to generalize, which is not really the intention, but like if you were to say of your own practical experience, what are what are the aspects or the things that when people have cancer that seems to really make a change? Like if you were to generalize, again, this is not prescriptive, and I know it's
Mhm.
a generalization, but what have you seen?
Um, the most simple way that you can put it is the two words cleanse and nourish. So we have bad things in our bodies, in our environments, in our food, our diet, our thoughts, all these negative things that we need to detox and cleanse and get out. And then we have a lot of good things, nutrients and love and joy and gratitude and positive emotions and
Mhm.
feelings and exercise and all the good, healthy things. And we need to nourish our bodies and get those good things in. So that is just the most basic and simple way that you can put it is just getting the bad out and getting the good in.
What would your life be like if you were pain free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
And then the naturopathic medicine is that detective work of figuring out specifically for that individual, what did you go through? Did you have traumatic emotional things? Are you familiar with Dr. Hammer's work with German New
Mm. Yeah.
Medicine? So
Mhm.
that was a really, really interesting experience that he had where his son passed away violently, and then he developed testicular cancer within a few months after that, and he kind of discovered this connection with severe emotional traumas and the body's survival mechanism of trying to um, repair, recreate that reproductive system um, to replace the loss of his son, and then that is kind of what stimulated and created that cancer. And so the more you can heal and work with through counseling or so many other different ways, those emotional traumas. Um, so emotional traumas are massive. Chemicals and chemical toxicity is massive, and
Mhm.
then toxic energies, we talked a little bit about in the pre-show. So the energetic pathway, there's good healing energy that you want to add into your life, and that can be healing. And then there's negative toxic energy like radiation from X-rays and CT scans and nuclear fallout and cell phones and cell towers and
Mhm.
um, Wi-Fi and all those kinds of things that just add a layer of stress to, especially to susceptible individuals, but to
Mhm.
all of us. It's just Dr. Jack Kruse calls it just non-native EMF or non-native electromagnetic fields that are not natural frequencies. They're not natural wavelengths.
Mhm.
They're man-made energies that are traumatic and toxic to the body. There's a really interesting book called the Invisible Rainbow that kind of goes through the very beginning. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't. No.
Excuse me. Um, that's more about the creation of radio waves and radio
Mm.
towers at the beginning of the century, and how that kind of coincided with the 1918 flu pandemic and things
Okay.
like that, how that was connected with the invention of radio and the propagation of
Mhm.
electrical transformers and the beginning of the electrical grid throughout the civilized world at that time. It started this massive spike of deaths that coincided almost exactly with the invention and propagation of electrical technologies in the early 1900s. So that's
Mhm.
a really interesting book, very in-depth, very scientific
Mhm.
about that kind of phase from 100 years ago. And then we're having a new phase of 100 years later, with the cell phones, the 5G networks, the Wi-Fi revolution, with every child having a cell phone in their pocket or purse at all times. And even though it's really hard to find those studies, common sense and some of the studies that have made it out there, and a lot of case reports of, women putting their cell phone in their bra and then
Right.
getting breast cancer on that breast, right where they were storing their cell phone against their body. So the personal experience that I went through, my wife and I were living in Portland, Oregon, and just absolutely beautiful Northwest, just similar beauty to where you live in BC. But yeah, just the big city, kind of right around the time of the 5G rollout, 2018, 2019, around that time. There was just a massive explosion of cell towers, and there's that antenna search website that you can kind of map out where the cell towers around where your house are, things like that. And my wife basically had this mystery illness. She was getting bloody noses, difficulty sleeping, just weakness and paralysis, passing out, and just fainting and being taken into the hospital and kind of getting an IV of fluids, and then sending her on her way over and over. So there was this kind of mystery dehydration and just other things going on. And she always knew that she was sensitive, like just a regular cordless phone that you'd have in the 80s and 90s would just give her headaches instantly, but she never really made that conscious connection. And so it was when we moved our Wi-Fi router from the third floor of the house in the basement to the second floor right under our bedroom, and then her symptoms doubled overnight. We were kind of finally able to put two and two together as, oh, it's this, the Wi-Fi, the cell phones and stuff. And so we started instantly, putting our cell phones on airplane mode. We wired our entire house for Ethernet, wired connections for the internet instead of Wi-Fi. So we got rid of the router, got rid of the constant cell phone signals, and only turn on the cell phone on power when we actually had to make a call. So we did a whole lot of things to remediate the situation, and that did really help improve her health and turn around very quickly. But then we had a giant ice storm that came through Portland, and a bunch of our trees just froze and just cracked in half. And so a lot of the trees that were shielding our bedroom from our neighbor's Wi-Fi were destroyed, and then that doubled her symptoms again. And so just the overlapping Wi-Fi cloud of all the houses close together in our neighborhood, and the electrical power lines were across the street, and they would always crackle in the rain, and you get constant rain in Portland, and you can just hear it crackling and sizzling on the high tension power lines. That was a little too close to the house and was probably causing issues, and different magnetic field issues that we measured. And so we kind of were thrown in the deep end of discovering the energetic pathway of my 7 pathways of healing. Like I said, there's a good side to energetic healing, and then there's the negative side of these destructive energies. And especially for susceptible, sensitive individuals, it does create these mystery illnesses. And then when you look it up online, it says it's a made-up thing, and people shouldn't be made to think that their lives will be better by reducing their Wi-Fi and their cell phone exposure and things like that. And so there's a lot of unfortunately misinformation, and whether it's out of ignorance or whether it's out of protecting the giant corporations, I don't really know what all the motivations are, but these energies have been linked to cancer, and it is common sense if you have these high frequencies, just like x-rays and CT scans, and obviously radiation from Hiroshima and Fukushima and Chernobyl have been linked to cancer. It's just different degrees of radiation, whether it's ionizing radiation or non-ionizing radiation, it doesn't really matter. It can still cause just a chronic irritation to the body that can eventually lead to the development of cancer. And we're seeing so many different cases of brain cancer on the rise on the side of the head where people hold their cell phone and things like that. So there's these correlations, and a lot of the science is really difficult to find, but it's out there, and it's just an unfortunate situation. But we were able to, move many states away and to out in a rural area in the country on a few acres, and we don't even get cell signal at the house most of the time because it's
Yeah.
so it's a opposite problem where it's hard to communicate sometimes, but it's worth it to have those health benefits for my wife, because she is so sensitive to different energies. And so I just want to encourage anyone that's listening that has a mystery illness. That's one of the big things, is electromagnetic fields. Other things obviously are, mold toxicity, other chemical toxicity that conventional medicine is kind of completely unaware of and never tests for. But there are tests out there that you can do to test for mold, for Lyme disease, for chemicals, for food sensitivities, things like that, that just aren't on the radar of any conventionally minded doctor. So functional medicine, integrative medicine, naturopathic medicine, doctors are all kind of educated in that field of that detective work to look outside the box and kind of figure out what's happening with that mystery illness.
And what do you use for mold as test?
I just use different labs. There's Cyrex and a few others has different mold markers. I think Doctor's Data is another lab that I use that they test for specific mycotoxins, and so you can kind of
I
pinpoint
think that's right.
which.
Dr. Stada has it. I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a book called Toxic by Neil Nathan that dives really deep into mold toxicity, and he also mentions some EMF sensitivity as well. That's really great read as far as going on that deep dive into the mold toxicity.
And then with the EMF, I know, I mean, I have this meter that I can kind of go around to just see, because I'm very, very sensitive. So I can feel it. I could feel it before with, like you said, with those old telephones. If I use my cell, it's on speaker and it's away from me, because I immediately get like hot and uncomfortable, and kind of like it hurts. That's the feeling I have. So I certainly feel that there's something going on. And, like there's quite a bit of research now with the nanoparticles and the self-assembling, technology inside our bodies, for many of the people who did end up taking some of these shots, which I won't use by name, but whatever has been going on for the last 4 years here. And I think that is, there's a link for sure with EMF going on here that is aggravating that very strongly. I don't know if you have found that, but I certainly have, in talking to people who felt coerced or felt they had no choice, that they're very aware. It's almost as if their body is electrified rather than, you don't need a phone anymore. I don't know if you've had those kind of sensitive people, or have you come across that? I mean, in the country, I guess less so, but
Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of feedback lately.
no, because
Haven't really talked about the vaccination status of a lot of
you haven't asked, yeah.
patients and clients. I've been a little bit more of the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing, unless they
Yeah,
brag about how they're triple vaccinated or whatever. But so yeah, everyone's on a different level, and everyone has different genetics, and that's that biochemical individuality. So one size doesn't fit all with diets, and one size doesn't fit all with EMF exposure. So one thing I'm curious about, have you experienced, or not experienced, but have you noticed throughout your life, do you feel like you're more intuitive than other people, or more psychically sensitive as well? So is it kind of across the board, all energies you're more sensitive to?
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I have no idea if there's like a genetic or a biochemical difference that is
Mhm.
that, or if that's more at the spiritual level of that the person's spirit is just
Yeah.
sensitive to all energy more, or their
Hmm.
energy field is just more open and more vulnerable to all good and bad energies. But
Hmm.
that's definitely the way my wife is, where
Hmm.
uh, she's just very intuitive, and as a marriage therapist, that was like her superpower, where she would
Right.
just know what to say and what to do to help
Yeah. Yeah.
heal someone's marriage or their emotional state or whatever it was. But then when it came to living everyday life, it was just like being bombarded by other people's thoughts and other people's feelings, and the cell phones and the energies and the headaches and the symptoms, and it was just becomes really, really overwhelming to have that level of sensitivity. So
Mhm.
that's something that I'm still working on
Mhm.
understanding and kind of researching
I think
and kind
it's,
of getting to the bottom of it.
yeah, and I think it's for one is recognizing that it's so, and then making decisions, like the ones you can avoid. So the mental emotional ones, where it's people are giving you negative energy or they're sucking energy out of you, those are, you can put an end to that, right? You can have boundaries where, nope, I can't take that, I don't want that, it's my choice. I don't mean rudely, I just mean you just got to know that this is not for you, like
Yeah.
I won't watch horror movies, I won't watch any of these things, because otherwise I'll be feeling it and dreaming it for days. I will be in the movie.
Mm.
So I know that's just not a choice, that I do. And then the rest, I mean, it's interesting. I met a man in Mexico who's a shaman,
Mm.
and he was saying y- your relationships to your, let's say, your phone, to the signaling, it's about a type of adaptation. You cannot isolate yourself from it because it's everywhere, but you have to find a way to adapt. And if you think about it, in 1918, and I have heard, I haven't read the book, but I've heard this, understanding of history. Eventually, most of us adapted, right? Who didn't get sick, or maybe the sickness was the adaptation. I don't know, right? But the question is, are we just, is that part of, sorry, is that part of the journey, is, coming to an adaptation, but you can't adapt when you're bombarded,
Yeah, it's hard. There's that
so
there's
yeah.
that bucket theory where, all you can do is kind of separate you have your circle of concern that's really big of all the things you're worried about and things that are in your environment that you can't control, but you're concerned about. And then that circle of control is smaller,
Mhm.
but all we can do is control what we can control, which is
Exactly.
our lifestyle, our diet, our homes, what energies and EMFs that we choose to allow ourselves. If we have a router, if we keep our cell phone on all day, if we sleep with it next to our head, all
Yeah.
those kind of things, those are choices that we have control over. But then the cell towers and the satellites and all the things that are
Right.
going into space, we can't control. And
Right.
it's just like toxic chemical exposure. They found DDT and all these benzene and all these toxic chemicals on the North Pole, where it's the most remote place
Yeah.
that you can get on planet Earth. And those places are toxified with chemicals. So you can't get rid of it. You can't run from it. You can't avoid it, but you can avoid overfilling the bucket theory. If
Yeah.
your bucket is overflowing with toxins, you can dump out half of that and detox your body, detox your home, your environment, your what you do have control over, and
Yeah.
then that can reduce that spillover of symptoms and kind of
Mhm.
bring back into balance where you can have the energy and your body has the resources to adapt to it again.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at the time. We are definitely over our time. But I think it's been a great conversation. Is there a last minute statement you'd like to make to finish up?
Yeah, just there's always hope, and there's always, no matter what doctors may say, you can always get a second or third or fourth opinion from not the same category of physician, but look at different forms of medicine, like I mentioned, integrative medicine, functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, are very overlapping fields of medicine where we're trained to think creatively, think outside the box, and to be exposed to other things. So there are answers out there, and you're never doomed by your genetics or your environment or a certain diagnosis or prognosis. I have a special presentation called 3cancerinsights.com that anyone can watch to check out just a quick 10-minute video about some of these ideas and the way to think about and approach cancer.
Great. So what's the URL? I'll put it in the show notes, but it's...
Yeah, it's just the number 3 at cancerinsights.com.
Okay, great. Super. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, great speaking with you today.
Okay. Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.